So welcome everyone to this LSE-Miguel Dols Fellows lecture for the springtime 2024. We'll have the full breadth of fellows that we have on the ground, but we have a very strong showing of fellows in which we're going to have 4 visiting researchers for Miguel Dols Fellows on economics and economic geography, dealing with the topics that they have come to do research here at the Cañada-Blanch Centre of the LSE. We're going to have the topics first starting with economic geography, followed by economics. And we're going to give everyone 20 minutes to present, and there would be 5 minutes for questions and feedback. So the idea that we can probably finish before 10 o'clock today, and then let's go all together and celebrate. So welcome. And we're going to start with the first topic, which is by Juan de Lucio, who is a professor at the University of Alcalá in Spain, going to do it online. He's going to talk about reducing trade with Russia, sanctions versus reputation. So Juan, the floor is yours.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank Cañada-Blanch, LSE, Victor, and of course, Andrés Rodriguez Jose for making this possible. And apologize also for not being able to be there today, as I would have liked. Okay, I think I inserted the presentation, I'm not sure. So the title of my presentation, in which I've been working during this last month.
Sorry, just make them full screen.
Okay, full screen. Let me see what is going on.
That's it. That's perfect.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So, as I was telling, the title is Reducing Trade with Russia, Sanctions versus Reputation, or sanctions versus voluntary suspension of activities with Russia. And the paper is a joint paper with Raúl Menguer, Asier Minondo, and Francisco Requena. And in this paper, we try to analyze the effects of the voluntary suspension of activity with Russia and the impact of sanctions. Okay, both effects simultaneously. As you probably know, as everybody knows probably, at this time, on February 24th of 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, and 1 or 2 days later, some companies announced that they would stop trading with Russia. At the same time, the European Union imposed trade sanctions, very huge trade sanctions, and no trade sanctions to Russia. These trade sanctions are among the most extensive ever imposed on a country. During that period, for instance, I recall that the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, came to Spain and welcomed the suspension of some companies, and also denounced those who were trading with Russia, who were still trading with Russia. And this behavior, Zelensky took this behavior also in the United States and some other countries. So there was a great involvement of companies related with trading with Russia. And the public opinion was also very strong on that topic. So, for instance, in this slide, you can see what happened 2 weeks later after the invasion. This is the shopping mall, the biggest shopping mall in Moscow. And as you can see, 18 different companies closed just a few days after the invasion. So in purple color, you have those spaces within the shopping mall that were closed just because companies decided that they voluntarily wanted to stop selling Russia. Very well-known brands that announced that they were stopping selling. And what we see is that this voluntary stopping selling in Russia, that this voluntary suspension of activities with Russia had a significant impact of trade. In fact, voluntary suspension of accounts for about 19% of the decline, this figure in exports. Meanwhile, sanctions accounts for 11% of the reduction of trade with sanctions. So the voluntary suspension had a bigger effect than the sanctions imposed by European Union. For imports, the right bar in the figure, the impact of the voluntary suspension was similar, is 21 versus 19 in export, 21, but the impact of sanctions was much larger, 32. So what we do is to quantify this impact. And in order to do that, we have first to identify the companies that voluntarily suspended activities with Russia. This is our first step. Second, we have to identify the products affected by trade sanctions. And finally, using fair level data and applying a different methodology, we are able to quantify the impact of both the voluntary suspensions and the sanctions. So this is the roadmap. I have explained the motivation, what had happened in the world, what we have found, a bigger impact of sanctions that a bigger impact of suspension of activity, voluntary suspension of activity than sanctions. This was unexpected, and how we will do that. No? So the empirical analysis is what I'm going to explain right now. This is the evolution of the export from Spain to Russia. There are 4 different colors. The top one, the brown color, represents the trade that has not been affected either by sanctions or by voluntary suspension. There is a reduction, but not a huge reduction of trade. The next bar, the blue bar, or the blue color, represents products. I want to insist in that idea. Products that was affected by European Union sanctions. Products that were not allowed to be traded with Russia. And as you can see, there is a huge reduction, but this takes longer to reduce the trade with Russia. The orange area represents products affected by sanctions, but that are traded by companies that decided to suspend activities with Russia. So in this case, we have both. These are products affected by sanctions that are traded by companies that decided to suspend activities with Russia. And as you can see, there was a specific amount that completely disappeared after 2 quarters. And finally, the green, this is the area that we are more interested of, is the products that are not affected by sanctions, but are traded by firms that suspend activities. So this is voluntary suspension of activities. These are companies that consider that maybe their reputation could be affected if they continue trading with Russia. And as you can see, the stop in their trade with Russia is quite rapid. 2 quarters after the invasion, they have suspended all kinds of activities. Okay, so this is the export. We also have the imports, but I do not want to spend time here because it's mostly affected by petrol and gas. I want to explain the difference in different strategy that we use. This is the equation that we are going to estimate. The equation is either export on imports by firm, product, and time, explained by dummy variables corresponding to products that are affected by suspensions and suspension, voluntary suspension, dummy variables representing those products and firms affected by both sanctions and suspensions, and finally, those products that are only affected by sanctions. The period is 2019 to 2023, the frequency quarterly, and we use the traditional pseudo Poisson maximum likelihood estimations because we have a lot of zeros in different firm and product information, okay? And when we estimate that equation, what we obtain is what you have in this slide that represents what is the impact of both sanctions, suspensions, and products and firms that are affected by both sanctions and suspensions. So first, let's the first block in red. We have a minus 0.8 impact of exports. This means that we have a minus 57% of reduction of trade of firms that are affected by sanctions. Then we have in the same column, corresponding by first column is exports. We also have the impact of suspensions. Suspensions, the second coefficient, minus 3.9. And this represents a 98% reduction of trade of firms that voluntarily decided to suspend activities with Russia. And finally, we have the impact on trade for those products that are traded by firms that voluntarily decided to stop trading with Russia. And this represents almost 100%, that is all the trade with Russia. And we also have the column for imports, and the figures are similar. The impact of suspension is bigger than the impact of sanctions, and we additionally have entry and exit. Okay, I'm not going to comment on that, but the results in general means that there is a reduction on entry and an increase in the exit, the probability of exiting Russia after the invasion, both derived by sanctions and by voluntarily decision of the firms. This is the quarterly analysis. In the previous slide, we only had one parameter after the invasion. In this case, we have one parameter per quarter for all the quarters after the invasion. And if you can see in the bottom left chart, only suspension, that is firms that voluntarily decided to stop trade, the impact seems to be earlier and bigger than the impact of sanctions. I mean, it's much bigger in the bottom two figures than in the top one, and the effect seems to be earlier than in the bottom graphs than in the top graphs that only represent sanctions. We have also done a different analysis. For instance, we have calculated what it would be the trade without no sanction and no suspension. The trade would have been 332, but with only sanctions, the trade will be lower to 197. That is minus 11% of the initial trade. And if we incorporate both sanctions and voluntary suspension, the trade will have been 234, that is minus 30%. So this represents that the sanctions have an impact of minus 11%, and sanctions plus suspension have an impact of 30%. The different 19 points is the impact of suspensions. And the panel B in the bottom is the impact for imports. We have done in the analysis some robustness checks. For instance, everything I have told till now is trade between Spain and Russia, just only trade with Spain and Russia. But somebody could say that maybe the trade could be different. The impact could be different if we consider some other countries, not only Russia and Spain, but all the trade with the rest of the world. In this graph, we have the triple difference, including all the countries in the world, and the results are similar. Then somebody would say that maybe the firms say that they have stopped selling to Russia, but in fact they are selling through different countries, maybe selling through countries that have free trade agreements with Russia. For instance, Armenia, Kazakhstan, or Kyrgyz Republic have a trade agreement, and okay, could be a good idea for some companies send the products through these countries to Russia. So we have analyzed that, and what we observed in column 1 is that the coefficients for suspensions are not significant for exports. No, okay. That it means that the Spanish export to these countries have not increased for companies that decided to suspend activity, companies that decided to stop selling to Russia. So this is not a washing politics from companies, because they are not rerouting. We observe some rerouting on imports in column 2. In column 2, we observe some rerouting, but the impact of this rerouting is small. Okay, and it could be not. I mean, if you start buying petrol to Russia, you have to buy petrol from some other places, and these countries might sell petrol and gas. And finally, we have compared what had happened in Crimea annexation in 2014. This is the previous invasion, and we do not observe these effects on the previous invasion. So we consider that this is completely new effect that represents that the companies maybe are more worried about what is going on in the world, and they have reputation considerations probably in their decisions of trading with Russia. So in conclusion, we have analyzed the trade sanctions against Russia after the invasion. That is a very new package of trade measures against one country, and we have observed that many firms, have voluntarily suspended activity with Russia. We probably consider that this is due to reputational pressure, and the combination of sanctions and voluntary decision of companies to suspend activities have led to a much larger reduction of trade with Russia. And the impact of the voluntary decision of firms is in export bigger than the impact of sanctions. In imports is also huge, but smaller than the impact of US sanctions. So thank you very much for your attention. I would be very pleased if you could provide me with comments and questions. Thank you.
Very much, very nice paper. Now we got a few minutes, and also for doing it on time, we have a few minutes for questions, if anyone has got questions. No. Enrico, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Juan. I was wondering if you actually can explain a bit more concerning the control group that you are using in your empirical strategy. I mean, my main concern is that there are, systematic differences between the traded ones and the controlled ones because of different attitudes toward import and export, and also, I mean, different behaviors and different firm composition, let's say. So if you can explain a bit more about concerning this.
Yes, I agree with that idea. I mean, it could be the case that those firms that decided to stop trading with Russia are more concerned about the impact on their sales, or their profits, on their employees, on the financial markets of being trading with Russia after the invasion. We only want to measure the impact that the size of these effects, the size of this is not like we are going to take a policy measure and we want a control group and a similar group with the same characteristics to check if the policy measure has an impact. In this case, there can be selection, no doubt, but the minimum impact of those firms is what the impact that we have measured. I mean, it could be the case that the impact could be even bigger, because there are some other firms that decided to stop trading and they didn't announce that they were stopping trading. So in this case, the analysis do not need a control group with the same characteristics. We only measure the impact that those firms that decide to stop trading have on the total trade.
Okay.
Not sure.
Yes, Alex?
Thank you so much for the research. My question is more about the Pierce graph when with the colors blue, red, yes. With the blue color, when there are only sanctions, we have a few space of exports. So maybe could you explain, please, like the context, how it's possible that Spain is still exporting goods with sanctions?
Yeah, very good question. I should have explained that in the measure that we have with the sanctions that we have imposed to Russia, there is some case that we have a minimum amount of trade. I mean, if you are trading very low, you are allowed to trade with them. There is some cases in Chevrolet and other products in which you can still, and you might have also long-term contracts, and European Union can allow you some exceptions of trading with Russia. This is why do we still have some blue area even in 2023, in the last quarter. This is a very nice question that is explaining, as I mentioned, is not fully forbidden in all the cases. Okay, you have some exception.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I just have a minor question, or well, it's related to the narrative, I guess, because in terms, you see a bigger effect of this on the suspension or the voluntary suspensions, but it seems that all the companies decide to voluntarily stop trading with Russia, do it at the beginning, and no the company does it thereafter. And I don't know how that affects your narrative, because it does seem that the part of the area that no sanction, no suspension is very constant after the invasion.
Yes, I think that maybe interesting question. Maybe the companies decides at the first moment of the war to suspend activities, and once they, I mean, first they do not recover these activities. a few months later. It could be the case that they announce they stop for 1 year and then recover after 2 years. And second, it could be also the case that some companies that maybe in 2022 could decide to suspend activities. But this is an interesting. The reaction of the firms were very sudden. I think that I have not analyzed, but I think that the pressure of the public opinion was in the very first moment of the invasion, no, in the beginning of the invasion, and there is a phasing out of the pressure that public opinion put on companies. And this could be the case that once that you have paid the cost of maintaining trade for maybe 2 or 3 quarters, you are no longer interested on stopping trade. Yeah, but this is interesting. Why all this suspension happens at the beginning? Thank you.
Not, I'm just going to go and have some comments before we move on. Thank you very much. I think it was a very nice paper, nice idea. But my objection would be in general, if you're not barking at the wrong tree, because you have several categories, which is suspension, sanctions, suspension and sanctions, and no suspension and no sanctions. And of course, if you are suspending, you're going to cease operations, and you're going to have almost, if it's applied adequately, you're going to find is that there's going to be no more trade. So it's going to decline by almost 100%. That's what you find, 98 and 95%. So that's already taken for granted. And it's going to happen at the beginning, because if you're going to get some sort of reputational reward, you exit Russia because you are outraged or you fear that the reputation is going to affect your business later on. You do it at the beginning. Once you are there, just coming out a year later is not going to, your reputation is already tarnished in most cases. But my question is, why not put the emphasis on the category that you actually overlook, which is no sanctions and no suspensions? That's the implementation of, on the one hand, first, voluntary suspensions, and then second, sanctions in other sectors actually affect the impact or has an impact on the firms that in principle should not be affected by this. Do they react in order to preserve their reputation or the risk they have, etc.? Do they actually reduce their trade? Which doesn't seem to be the case that much from your graph, but it's something that you might want to analyze. Also, on the sanctions, and you have the aggregate numbers, but would it not be good to complement it with, let's say, looking at firms? Because when you have the sanctions, you have 3 types of firms that intensive behavior. Those that voluntarily abide by the sanctions, the European Union says, you cannot trade with Russia, and they stop because it's forbidden. Those that continue to trade, but then are policed or monitored and therefore have to stop. And those that perhaps decide, well, we're just going to ride this sort of situation and provide it until we are told to stop, until we're monitored by police, we can continue to do it. And it would be good if you can distinguish between those, because it would give a very important nuance to a story that what you're telling now is more or less expected on the basis that, yeah, the base reduction is from those that exit, and it's almost 100%. And then finally, which I'm already mentioned, but it's in more detail, if you would not like to complement your analysis with some, let's say, more detailed case studies, firms that have exited and why they have exited, firms that have remained in Russia and why they have remained, firms that actually were affected by sanctions and what has it meant to them in that respect.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much for all your comments, Andres. Very interesting. I will consider to include maybe, I don't want to make the paper bigger, but I think that some additional analysis will benefit the final product. Yes, I think everything is a good idea. And I was thinking about the the sanction is to affect the Russian economy. If the Russian economy was affected by the sanctions, we also will have expect a reduction in no sanction and no suspensions because the economy is smaller, no? And as you said, and somebody else also told, the red part seems to be quite similar from the beginning to the end. Okay, thank you. Sorry, no additional comment.
Thank you very much. So now we're moving to the second paper by Federico Zampoglio, who is doing his PhD at the Gran Sasso Science Institute, GSSI in L'Aquila in Italy. He's going to be talking about what is the impact of establishing subnational institutions on economic growth, the case of Italian regions. So here, Federico, you have 20 minutes, and your 20 minutes start now.
Thanks a lot. So I'm very happy to be here to have the possibility to present this. It is very preliminary, but I mean, because of this, I really need your comments to understand if it is like a good idea, a good strategy to pursue it, etc. We are focusing with actually Augusto Ceppa and Andrea Scani, that are my supervisors, on the establishment of regional governments in Italy. And we are trying to understand if there is an effect on economic growth at the local level.
You just have to press. No, I think it's just blocked.
There.
Try now. Try now. I'll go back.
Yes.
It was just blocked. Sometimes you have to press on the screen.
Okay. Okay. So, in a nutshell, what do we focus on? We study the causal impact of establishing Italian regional governments, and this happened actually in 1970, on local economic growth, and we proxy local economic growth by municipal population dynamics. Concerning the relevance of this work, actually, we know that there is an increasing fiscal and also administrative decentralization processes. And these, of course, have granted greater centrality to local authorities. And concerning the contribution of our paper, actually, we provide causal evidence on the importance of subnational institutional quality for local economic growth under political decentralization. So there is this nexus that is very important for us. So the quality of the institutional governments at the regional level and the decentralization process that happen at the same time for all the regional governments with ordinary legislation, let's say. So there were 15 regions that were established at the same moment in 1970. We exploit a data set on municipal population dynamics from 1958 to 2020. And also we use Putnam and co-authors comprehensive and all-encompassing, but also empirically underutilized index of regional institutional quality and performance. So a bit of context, we all know that there are plenty of papers that say that institutional quality plays a pivotal role in generating significant disparities in economic growth. And recently, this increasing decentralization, of course, led scholars to increase their attention on the impact of regional institutional quality on the economic system. And the empirical research underscores actually the advantages of decentralization in advanced economies. For example, decentralization provides better public goods provision, increased public sector efficiency, and gives more accountable fiscal policies, reduce corruption, and also have an effect of greater trust in government activities. But at the same time, there are also negative effects. There could be also negative effects because actually the empowerment of local governments can also have negative consequences due to poor political leadership quality, for example. And this can happen when local politicians are inexperienced, for example, or also motivated by private interests. Okay. And of course, the presence of both formal and also informal institutions, such as the established norms of conduct and behavior, can actually mean that public service provision can be undermined by weak civic sense, and especially in regions with significant intranational disparities like the work of. So what we do, actually, considering this context, is taking advantage of this unique experiment that was the establishment of the regional governments in 1970. And thanks to this setting, we are actually able to causally exploit the establishment of subnational institutions from scratch, and we evaluate the impact of decentralization on local economic growth. The main source of our data, of our analysis are data collected and digitized from this. Like this is an example of a PDF that we digitized, and these are annual data on municipal population flows that includes newly registered citizens, citizens that are cancelled from the population register, newborns, deaths, and also the number of citizens. So population in general. And we have this time series from 1958 to 2020. And actually, our empirical strategy wants to exploit a difference in this continuity setting. So actually, we have a formal treatment that is the establishment of the regions in 1970. And because before there were no regional governments at all, beside the special status regions. And then there is the establishment of the regional governments. And actually, within this framework, we can exploit the discontinuity at the border between different, across regions. Okay, so we have the regional borders and we compare nearby the municipalities that are just above or just below the regional borders. So these are our discontinuity, and the difference that we compare is the actually difference in population growth or population dynamics over time. So we do it by taking for granted that institutional quality matters. So this is our main hypothesis concerning our work. And there is this huge and comprehensive index that was realized by Putnam in 1983 and also 1993, sorry, and also co-author. That is a massive work of observation of regional governments that includes 12 variables, actually, that concerns policy processes, decisions, and implementation of the regional governments in Italy. And actually, they produce this index that is an index for the period that is going from 1978 to 1985, with 9 levels of institutional quality. What we want to do is trying to take for granted that institutional equality matters in the development of the municipalities within different regions. We try to understand if municipalities belonging to regions that have different institutional quality actually perform better than the others in terms of economic growth, local economic growth. So I will give you an example only concerning one border, because we performed the analysis only for this border, and the border is the border between Lazio, that is this region, and Campania. So actually, Lazio has institutional equality that has a level of 5 out of 9, and Campania has the lowest performance in terms of institutional equality. So from these plots, you can see actually the population. There are no regressions here, okay? So no models, anything. There are only the average value of the population, taking as a reference value the population in 1971, that is 100. So we have averages of municipalities that are every 2 kilometers from the border, up to 20 kilometers from the border, both for Campania and for Lazio. Actually, we can see that actually there is not a net discontinuity in 1960. There is a decrease in the population, let's say, of Lazio in 1970. This is the year of the treatment. And here we can see the huge jump. That is, I repeat, the no model here, actually. So we can see that actually the population in Lazio increased a lot with respect to the one in Campania after 10 years of the from the establishment of the regional governments, and this is persistent actually over time. Then we complement this analysis with more like within a counterfactual framework, performing a synthetic difference in differences estimator. Actually, the dependent variable is the population, while the controls in this setting are the newly registered citizens, the citizens cancelled from the population register, the newborns, and the deaths. What the synthetic difference in differences does is actually taking the municipalities that are treated and using weights to build a counterfactual and comparing trends as a difference in differences setting. The treated group is the Lazio municipalities, while the control group are the Campania municipalities. And we actually see that there is the effect of the regional government that is persistent over time. Of course, there could be a lot of noise in 2000, actually in the years that are from 1990 and on. There are, of course, other factors that we have to deal with that are the differences in regional public spending, for example, the centralization of wage bargaining, and the social capital that is a factor that determines different institutional performance levels, the crisis for the oil, that some regions, actually some regions are more exposed than others to this crisis, that are regions in the south mainly, and also the Cassa per il Mezzogiorno that are funds for southern regions. So these are all like additional analysis that we have to perform in addition to what we are trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Federico. So questions? Yes, Andres?
Professor, can I make like a comment of?
Yeah, of course, sir.
In your slide, when you talk about the empirical references in the beginning, when you talk about why it's important the quality of institutions, you have a list of references. For me, yeah, in my understanding, like the conclusions are like very yes.
This one.
Yes, like better public goods,
but these are not about institutional equality, while decentralization.
Exactly. But I mean, better public goods provision. So for me, it's like very qualitative. So I mean, if you can like add one data, like how many or what type of public services in what percent, was better. My question, two questions: why your focus is in borders and not in like in all the regions? general, just across the borders, and then you talk about population, and population is the dependent variable, but your aim is economic growth. So why not quality?
Yes, yeah. Well, actually, concerning the border, this to exploit the power, let's say, of the discontinuity, because you exploiting the border, you, in theory, compare municipalities that are quite similar in terms of some unobservable characteristic that you can't measure in, actually. So this is why focusing on the borders. Concerning the population, this is, well, a main concern of us, of like framing our research, talking about local economic growth and proxy local economic growth by population dynamics. This is, of course, a strategy because we have these data that are only covering population dynamics. We will complement this data with some census data that are every 10 years from 1951 that are about enterprises and I mean the economy in general. But at the same time, what I can say, and thank you because I would have been more explicit on this. There is evidence that actually the population, mainly in Italy, is really connected to less growth in terms of economic outcomes. Also considering the huge north-south divide that is very important, and also we have to deal with it within our frame. But thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions?
I have just a
Yes.
question. If you could put the last slide back. So you said that you have to take this into account. How are you going to do that?
Okay, well, actually, we collected many data. So we have data on the annual regional public spending. We actually can deal with social capital in various ways because social capital is persistent. So it was there also before the established regions, so we can take advantage of this within the empirical setting. And maybe also comparing, for example, Umbria and Marche as a huge difference in terms of institutional quality, but they are measured as like having the same level of social capital by Putnam. So comparing also this border allows us to understand if actually social capital has a role or not. Then OPEC crisis, we will well, actually the oil crisis, we will complement this data with the economic structure of the regions and the municipalities that are analyzed. And we have also data for the Cañada-Blanch. The main problem, in my opinion, that we have to think about, and maybe if you have suggestions, I don't know, is trying to understand how to deal with this thing, because there is a huge problem in understanding decentralization of wage bargaining and the effect of it on the local economy, because actually it is a policy that happened in 1969. So it is very difficult to understand how to deal with that.
Question over here. So your name is?
My name is Yui.
Hey.
Yui.
Yui.
I'm just wondering, like you found that population growth is more rapid in places with good institutions, and it's due to migration, or it's due to just more newborn baby.
Well, actually, at the moment, the growth of the population is is trying to be positive in Lazio that has more institutional quality than Campania, need of controlling for newborns and death. So we are taking into account that things, trying to understand if actually not considering all the normal population dynamics that happen within a community, if actually there is a role of the regional government instead of other factors that are like normal factors like that can
The result of
impact.
migration, people are more likely to migrate to places with.
It could be, but we also control for new registered citizens and citizen cancelled for other. Well, actually, yes, it can be due to migration patterns. Yeah, well, or because of depopulation, so out migration from the control group after the establishment of regional government.
Hello. Yes. Can I say something?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. My question is related. I mean, maybe it is not a question, just a comment, and maybe it can be helpful to you. First, it's related with migration. The trends in migration have changed a lot, but it's related also with population. It seems that it zero-sum game, because the population is moving from one municipality to another. So what it earns one region depends on what other region lose. But it depends also on the population dynamics. There has been so important changes in birth and death rates. And finally, you also might consider, so my suggestion is that maybe you can take control of some of these aspects, taking into account population in working age, population, labor force, or these sort of things. There is another topic that I think you might have think is productivity levels. Maybe you increase population in tourist country regions or municipalities that are low productivity, or so I leave it there. And the suggestion is, okay, if I understood well, what you are saying is that previous to the 60s, the institutional quality was the same for all the municipalities and regions. And 20 years later, let's say in the 90s or in the institutional quality is different. And you can perform the analysis that you have done for Lazio and Campania for different borders, for different municipalities. So you will have a collection of different impacts of different borders between regions and the institutional quality of those regions. So you might do a regression analysis or maybe a panel data analysis with institutional quality and the relative change in population is a suggestion.
It's a lot for the suggestion.
We need to move forward, but I do have some comments, otherwise we are not going to be able to finish. Nice topic and very good ideas and something that needs to move forward. But as I always say, you're not here to get praise, you're here to get feedback at this stage. First one is what Andres was saying. You're not measuring economic development, you're not measuring economic growth, you're measuring population growth. So say population growth. There's nothing wrong with doing an analysis of population growth when you're doing population growth. When you're doing economic development, you should get data on economic development, and that should be clear. So my advice would be, how does it affect the demographic dynamism of the regions? I think you are a victim of fashion. So you have a lot of diff and now and discontinuities and using the borders, etc. But is it really relevant? Why? Because you're assuming that if you are close to the border in Lazio and you're close to the border in Calabria, you're going to be similar. But it might not be the case. What you have to do is compare pair with pairs and make sure that the pears are pears and the apples are apples. And you're also then overlooking a lot of other areas, municipalities within your regions that are a bit more distance from the border. So why not, when you're doing the comparison, consider, let's say, municipalities that are similar in classification and with a not close to the big cities. So rural municipalities of population between 2,000 and 5,000, then 5,000 and 10,000, 10,000 to 20,000, whatever you want. And that has the advantage that then you cannot just compare Campania with Lazio, Campania with Calabria, or let's say Piedmont with Lombardy, which are neighboring. You can compare the whole of Italy. Because you're saying, to what extent does a better institutional quality linked to decentralization actually affect then the performance of small towns or medium-sized towns, etc. Third thing, which I think is interesting, is that well, you put the example of Lazio, which has a dynamic city of Rome, and then you put on the other side a Campania, which, despite having a large city, Naples is not very dynamic. So it might be a lot of other factors that you put a lot of factors towards the end, but you forget the most important one, which is economic dynamism. That if you have economic dynamism, that's going to affect, although it might affect less similar places. So a rural area in an inland province in Lazio, it might behave in a very similar way to that of an inland municipality in Salerno, Campania. So you might want to take a look at that. You're putting a lot of emphasis on discontinuity. And of course, in Italy, the regions were established in 1970, but they didn't really exist. There was no real transfer. Most of the transfer happens in the late 1970s and even more in the 80s. And it fundamentally happens in health and not in anything else. So the question is it really decentralization or is it quality of government? And here, the quality of government or the quality of institutions is something that you're based in Putnam, which is 1993. How does it affect something that happens at the beginning? You're assuming that institutional quality is fundamentally stable. And you're also institutional quality is more or less affected by decentralization, or it affects decentralization. It can be in all directions. And my question is this institutional quality, do you think that is unchangeable? Is something that is really affected by decentralization, or it then impinges on decentralization? Or is it something that comes from the past? And you have to bear in mind that you're saying, yeah, decentralization is important in Italy, but it's minute in comparison to what you had in the 19th century. So a century before the actual decentralization, which was separate countries. Whereas Umbria, sorry, not Umbria, but Lazio was part of the Papal States and Campania was part of the Kingdom of the Sicilies and all that. So you might want to consider that. So is it decentralization driving change in institutions, or is it institutions? The question was probably, and then is it a question that this is something that comes from? And just the final point, related a bit to what I said before, have this idea that, well, you're putting Campania next to Lazio. Why not compare Umbria, that surprisingly comes as one of your top two regions, that is surrounded by quite a lot of other regions that very often were part of the same part of Italy, historically, the Papal State, the same state, and that are surrounded by Lazio, Marche, Abruzzo. Well, Abruzzo was a different state, but nevertheless, or also Tuscany, which was a different state, that were also have got very different levels. But I would insist that you don't probably need to be a slave on comparing across borders. You need to compare, in my view, which I think would be far more interesting, to compare across categories, types of cities, types of municipalities, etc. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Any feedback, any reactions, or apart from thanking me?
No, I mean, I thought there was no time actually to answer.
Okay.
No, and anyway, well, actually, I like the sentence victim of fashion. But
Fashion victim.
yeah. Fashion victim. No, anyway, the plan is going to, I mean, exploit the entire peninsula, so all the Italian borders in principle. I understand that actually economic dynamism, that is, I think, that most important thing, can affect the regional also development over time. And what you said about the different institutions that were like before in the past established, so the states, etc., it is much more related to what Putnam said about social capital, I would say. So this is a very hard to deal with topic if we want really to disentangle and doing like a very good job in trying to measure the effect of regional governments, actually. Because also, as you said, there is this, there is the possibility that institutional equality affects regional governments and the other way around. So it is difficult to disentangle all the things that are going on. And the suggestion on considering also the different size of the cities and different economic dynamism, maybe of different zones, can be the key, maybe. So thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, okay, then we go to the third presentation, in this case by Andrea Damian, who is doing her PhD at Alessandro Ioan Puzza University of Iași in Romania, and also at the Côte d'Azur University in Nice, France. So you're going to be talking about human capital and academic trends, a European overview with an emphasis on Romania's educational landscape.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Andres, Cañada-Blanch Centre, and Victor for welcoming me here and for giving me this opportunity. I will go ahead and start my presentation. So I have a few things about the background. This is a study about education, because education is the main component on human capital. And as previous studies highlighted, education is a driver for individual income growth, has an impact on poverty reduction and population well-being, strengthen the governance system, and enhance the economic growth. In the past years or past decade, European Union has faced some challenges like unemployment or skill population reduction. So they came with a plan which is called European Education Area, and which foresees, among the others, that by 2030, there should be less than 50% of 50 years old, which will achieve, which will be a low achiever in readings, mathematics, and science. Okay, so today I will focus more on statistics and in results from Romanian National Assessment. They are both performed on 15 years old students. If PISA test is performed once every 3 years, the Romanian National Assessment are performed every year because it's a mandatory condition for enrolling in high school. In PISA, we have 3 thematics, which is reading, math, and science. In Romania, we have 2 thematics, which are Romanian language and literature and math. And there will be 3rd thematics for the one part on the national minorities. First one, the PISA test assess the creative thinking and the ability of applying the knowledge on everyday life situation. When the Romanian National Assessment focused more on the evaluation of the memorization and the ability to remember a large volume of information. In PISA, there are 6 levels of proficiency, but most often people are talking about 2 of them, which is the above top 5 level, which are also called top performance. And this one, the lowest performance, which is below level 2. In national assessment in Romania, students can obtain grades from 1 to 10, where 1 is minimum and 10 is maximum. And for today, I tried to answer 3 questions because the 4th one will be for the next period. It's more descriptive research at this point, but I would like to also include some more advanced methods. So I tried to find an answer to the following questions: how have PISA proficiency levels changed between 2022? How have national assessment results changed between the same period? And what are the main determinants that are associated with better PISA test results? Why I think it's important to the study? First, because the main importance of the education in human capital formation is also important for Romania, but also global level, because global competitiveness this linkly depends on human capital. And why it's important to check the level of performance of Romanian students in 2 contexts, within the country and cross country, because this will help to identify the needs or the direction for improvement. What I think is now will give you at this moment. I'm doing a study for the European Economic Area, so mainly I performed the study on 2019, so that's why I had to deal with 28 plus Norway and Iceland, because they are the data for Norway and Iceland. And the previous studies have been carried out at the level of 1 or a small group of countries, and usually for only 1 year, and I'm trying to like an analysis for the first time. And I'm trying to, I know there are different methodology on collecting data, but I'm trying to do a comparative approach between the results of a critical thinking assessment and the one based by parallel memorization. As I said, I use more descriptive analysis. I also perform a multiple regression analysis. I use data for reading and data for Romanian language literature and math for the same period, and I also use variables from stuff. In the future, I would like to apply the data envelopment analysis possible and time series, but data envelopment analysis by far one of the most methods for in PISA test evaluation. What I find so far, countries in Eastern and Europe which have a centralized education system with some tendency towards centralization tend to perform similarly. There are high percentages of students below level 2 and low percentages of proficiency level between above level 5. And countries where trust in public is high, the language of testing is also mother tongue, and migratory balance is positive, there are more likely to report higher PISA scores from a statistical point of view. So for this graph, they represent the percentage of students who are top and low performance in 2018, 2022, and I also included 2009 just as point of reference. The first thing that stands out is that compared to 2018 and 2022, the percentage of students that are low performers have increased, and the percentage of students that are top performers decreased. And this is the situation both on reading and mathematics. And that, but here I came up with the same thing, skills where from European economic area, where it said that by 2030, less than 50%, of all the students should be allowed to pursue mathematics and science, and I think that quite well, it has a lower probability because in education, not like in other part, or this requires time in order to see a significant change, and I think it's quite possible in 6 years to reduce the low performers in, for example, Glory or in Cyprus from almost 6 to 50. After I ran several regression models, which all were significant level between 0.01. I think as I stated earlier, where countries where trust in public institution is high, the languages of testing is also the mother tongue, and migratory balance is positive, are more likely to report higher PISA scores.
But this is at individual level, the data here. Right, so how many individuals are you looking at? How many? Sorry?
30.
So the unit is the country.
Yeah.
And you're doing a regression with 30 countries?
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
But
Right.
just to see how it works, because previously I tried to program the regression for the proficiency levels, and none of them were. So because it's the overall score, there is a level.
So, but in every case, you have 30 countries, you'll have the individuals within the country.
Okay, then I move forward to Romania. So I analyzed the distribution of internal language and literature and mathematics grades in 2000 and 2000. In terms of grades, we can see between that there is increase between the higher grades, above 8, and then there's an increasing of intermediate averages. They're mainly between 6 and 7. There is also a concentration of lower averages in the central Romania and Romania, where usually there are so in the center there is a concentration of Bulgarian population, and in the western part there is a concentration of Roma population, which may raise the need for more policies. And then I just proceeded for the mathematics. There, as far as the results are concerning, they are much more lower than those in language and literature. And which ones raise again the issue of memorization of over critical thinking, and I think that needs to change the learning paradigm and adopt more effective curriculums. And there is an important change between 2018 and 2022. So I don't know at the moment if it's a consequence of the previous adopted measure or a consequence of change of the evaluation type, because for in 2018 there was the subjects were with free answer, but they switched to multiple choice. And future work, next period I'll try to answer the main determinants that are associated with different level of performance in national assessment. And I'm thinking to add minorities and dynamic variables and to apply this methodology for data I have. And maybe time you may think what is the relationship between national assessment and PISA. There is a personal assumption, and I think that in PISA are sensitive to perform better, but they have own so I cannot this at the moment. I only some news in the local newspaper with schools that were selected to participate in this. I couldn't find any database with all the schools that are participating. So, previous assessment. And one interesting thing that I found is that over half of Kenya's upper secondary education students are enrolled in vocational programs, which is about the EU average. But what not taking into consideration is that in VAE usually goes to low performance under there is the only option for them to continue their student study. There may be implications for the countries with the same educational types. This highlights the need for more inclusive policies, the need of a common European education policy, common standards adopted at European level, and foster the governance process in Romania.
Comments, questions? What was the first one?
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Two questions. When you are showing the four graph with the top students and the lowest students for reading and maths, so we can see that the top students has better performance through the time, and the worst student has the worst performance through the time. Yeah, and I understood that. I'm not sure if I'm wrong. And one explication is because the top students has vocational education and training. I understood that. Is true or like how the
no, I don't, especially in Romania because I checked this will go back here.
exactly.
Now here the percentage of students from all the students, like 60% or 65% of the students in Cyprus case, they were under the level 2 of proficiency in math, and that means they are not. So there is an explanation of the what means the level 2 of proficiency here. So the level 2 is considered the minimum level of proficiency that all students should acquire by the end of secondary education. And at this level, students can, in practical terms, use basic algorithm, simple scientific knowledge, and interpretive text. So they cannot stay under this level.
Okay. Could you explain, please, when you are making the regression?
Yes.
This one. Like, could you explain the data? What did you find, for example, for each variable? Because the dependent variable is the general thesis for PISA.
Yes, okay.
And what was the results with the other variable? The independent variable. You know what I mean? So for example, I see that the variables are migratory balance, corruption perception in. This is the variables that are explain the change of the results in the PISA score, right? Exactly. So explain please what was the results, what was the data? For example, in how many percent the corruption perception affect the PISA results? Yes, how many percent education spending of share of the GDP affect the PISA score?
understand that we can talk.
No, we can go later, but it does show fundamentally that is you score lower if you come from an ethnic minority, but you also score higher if you come in a place with a high level of corruption, or where corruption is. But so that's something we need to talk about. Anyone else? No. All right. So that's my turn. Thank you, Andrea. This is a very interesting topic, in which I think you have a lot of potential and you have a lot of ideas, but you have to perhaps, if I were to give you some piece of advice at this stage, prioritize what you want to do. You're trying to do far too much for a paper. And the main problem is you cannot run any regression with 30 units, because then you have these sort of results that might be real or might be just completely spurious.
Yeah.
So my advice would be either you center on individuals, or you center on regions across Europe, or you center on municipalities in Romania, or you can do separate papers on all of them. The good news about the PISA data set is that you have individual results for 16-year-olds. So you have a total, I don't know, depending on the wave of the PISA, what you have is, although it's not a panel, it's a survey, you have for each one levels of, I think at the beginning was about 500,000 to levels of several million people that are being tested. I don't know exactly the numbers, but it's in that dimension. So you have all the individual characteristics, and you also have the places where these people come from, in terms of countries, or in terms of regions, or in terms of municipalities. Both might be a bit far-fetched, but you get it for the Romanian data set. Yeah, they are available online. As far as I remember, it can be freely downloaded. I haven't checked this since the PISA Wave 2015, so it's been a while. But
this year, but and also fine. Because I requested the data from Romania, the Romanian language.
But they can be downloaded. They were downloaded from the OECD PISA website in the past. I haven't checked.
Yeah, I downloaded this one.
All right. No, it was. You can get it at the individual level, or perhaps you need to ask now for a special request. But you can get it, and you can do it. And that would be more interesting because it would give you have to have some sort of theory of what determines the expectations of why some children are better than others. Is it a question of, let's say, individual characteristics? Are your parents educated, highly educated? Are they well off or not well off? Or it might be also, for example, something related to the place where you live. Are you in an urban or a rural area? Are you in an area with a lot of ethnic minorities or less ethnic minorities? Are you in an area that's fundamentally well off, an area that is less well off? And you can balance all this individual versus territorial characteristics to see which one matters. In the case of Romania, you have is from the Romanian tests. You have the data by municipalities. How many municipalities have them? You have quite a lot.
So I did this on the local level. I mean,
but how many? You have?
I mean, on the municipalities
Yes.
or the community.
Well, whatever you represented in the
3,000.
3,000, 1,181 in the map. That's a lot. I mean, you can do a regression with that as well.
Yeah, with that.
And that would be a good idea. The problem here is the reliability of the data.
Mm-hmm.
If you put the maps, and you highlighted it yourself. I mean, I was looking at it saying, there has been a massive improvement theory between 2018 and 2022. Is it because suddenly Romanian schools have become so much better? Or is it because the criteria have changed, the test has changed, or there's an index by the government saying, hey, we cannot show that we're not very good, our children are not very good in maths. Let's make sure that they actually improve. And of course, the question here would be whether Romanian tests, language tests, are so significant, especially when you have areas with large concentration of minorities, especially areas of Transylvania. But this is something that you have to think in two ways. First, well, three types of things. First, how do you structure your research question? And try to do one research question per paper at a time. If you do too many research questions, then it all becomes. If you're doing a PhD as a book, You can tackle several research questions. You do a paper, the ones that work best, one research question, one hypothesis. No hypothesis, alternative hypothesis, to demonstrate something. In order to have your research question or hypothesis, you need to have some sort of theory about how do you answer such question. And then you need to look at the method. I have the impression that, especially in economics these days, there's a lot of emphasis. We start with the method, and then we just ask them the question. That's the wrong way around. We start with something that is sharp and new, with a gap in the literature, a research question that is radically new. Fortunately, not all of us can think about new research questions. Not what is a gap in the literature, or how can you contradict existing literature. Then look at the theories to corroborate that what you have is true, and then select the right method. That, not just start, I got this cool method that everyone is using, and then I'm going to ask a research question. And if you can do that, one question at a time, you have not just one paper, but a convoluted and first paper, you have 2 or 3 very good, very well framed research papers. Okay. Thank you. So,
further about the
good. I didn't give you time to actually reply. You have about a minute to reply if you want.
Right
No, I mean, if you don't want to reply, you don't have to.
I don't have, but discuss after.
No, yeah, we can do it after also. All right, so fine. And then we go last but not least. So it doesn't mean that being last is the least important. It might be the most important because we're all concentrating harder right now. Is Lleó-Bono, who is doing her PhD at the University of Cambridge and has come all the way down to London. And she's going to be talking about comparing oranges to oranges. So that was saying apples to apples now, because we are at the center. Cañada-Blanch Centre has to be about oranges. So that's a nice way to go about. Field RCT on team incentives and productivity. And enlighten me, what is RCT?
Yeah, I changed it.
experiment.
Sorry. Yeah, it's a RCT is randomized controlled trial. So,
Okay, so it's an experiment.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I changed the title. Sorry about that.
Good. It's always important to make sure that your grandmother can understand what you're doing.
The title, yeah.
So,
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for having me here. So, yes, as he introduced, I'm going to present this field experiment on team incentives and productivity. So I'll quickly go a bit over the literature review, and then I'll explain the field experiment. Then I'll go over the lab in the field, which is some surveys, as experimentalists would do in the lab, but I was doing it with the workers of the company. And afterwards, I'll present some preliminary results. I still don't have all the data, so I have a disclaimer saying that this might change a lot. And then next steps. So in terms of the context of the research question, we're working with orange and mandarin companies, so citrus companies, and the orange pickers, they get paid by kilogram. So the salary is only incentivizing the quantity that they pick. So the problem here is that sometimes because they pick too quickly, or they even have the incentive to put some oranges that are rotten and they shouldn't put in the basket, they still put them way more, they have a high salary. So we have this problem of waste in what they pick. And they did try a couple of times to change the salary structure, but it didn't really work because they measure the quality in teams. So it's a bit unfair to reduce the salary of some workers because of the work of the others. So they basically couldn't implement it in the salary structure. So the research question is, what other incentive can we use to solve this problem on the quality of the work quality? And my treatment is a competition by teams every 4 weeks. So to give an example of this bad quality, what I mean by quality would be this, for example. So in here, like you can see the fields are torn, and these ones are picked from the ground. So it's obvious that you shouldn't pick those oranges. So it's not like we're measuring something and that is subjective. Like it's easy to measure. In terms of the literature, there's many experiments. There's I won't go in detail over this, but basically, yeah, there's been tested monetary versus non-monetary incentives, individual versus team incentives. But in the literature, usually, in terms of monetary and non-monetary, they use two different incentives to tackle the same factor. In my paper, I have each type of incentive, one for the quality, one for the quantity. It is also monetary, like the price that they get can be a voucher, or I'll go in detail about that later. But yeah, I have different factors that don't necessarily go together in my measure of productivity, and this is something that I'm going to explore in my theoretical model as well. And then in terms of the pool, usually, so for example, these famous strawberry papers by Bandera here at LSE and her authors, they have students coming abroad for the summer to pick up. So they, like, my pool is quite unique in the sense that they care a lot about the salary. So what the literature claims that works for workers maybe doesn't really work for this type of participants. So the field experiment, as I mentioned, it's a competition, quality competition monthly. So out of all of the teams that I have in the three companies, 50% of those teams are in the control, 50% are in the treatment. I will show geographically they are very separated, and I have in the survey, I collect a lot of data to make sure that the control is not contaminated and they are not aware of the experiment, so it can be a good control group. And then, yeah, half of the teams in each company participate. So I'm stratifying by company. The price, they can choose merchandising of the value of 50 euros, or if they don't want the clothes, they can still pick up a voucher. So we make sure that they all care about because like an argument before we were only going to do the company clothes, but they were like, what if they don't care? Then the incentive is not going to work. So we give an alternative to make sure that everyone at least values it for 50 euros. And then the factors that we take into account for the price, we send them an email, a message with all the specific types of defects that the orange have that would penalize them. So they have full information on these defects, and they all depend on their way of picking. It's not something related to the quality of the field or something like that. But I do have information on that, so I can control for it later, and I can take all these extra conditions, weather and everything into account. So this is the deadline.
Sorry, just one for clarification. You told us the incentives, but what is the competition about? Who wins?
The team every 4 weeks, the team with a better percentage of quality.
All right. And who measures the percentage of quality?
The companies. Yeah, I have here more detail. So every 4 weeks, I was analyzing the data and creating the rankings, but they already have the information that they give. So usually they do they take like I don't know, around 10 and 20% of the audiences, and they take them one by one, and they have 3 different checks, so it's quite reliable. So in terms of the timeline, I did some surveys that I will get into detail in a couple of slides before the intervention. Then I did the intervention and I repeated it for 3 months. Then I have, before announcing the first winner of the first month, I asked them if they thought they were going to win, and a couple of other questions. I'll get into detail. And then after, I also did another survey to collect more data. So in terms of the demographics, this is a map of where the oranges are grown. And I have 3 large companies and 78 to 80 teams in total. In terms of the structure of the company, I do have information on their 2. So all of the surveys are done to the team leader, and every team leader has an average of 10 pickers in their group. They might be familiar, they might be not. So all in the survey, I will try to capture a lot of social cohesion components and other factors that might impact the effectiveness of the incentive. And then all of the team leaders answer to a company buyer. So the term company buyer means that they are workers from the company that go to the fields and analyze the quality, establish a price, because not all the fields are owned by the company. And again, I can see this information. And I can also control for a company buyer in case having a different boss might differ the quality of your work. So in terms of the first survey, I asked for some demographic questions. I also asked for demographic questions to the company data in the company database, but I also asked it in the survey to contrast, just in case there's something that is not updated, especially education or. Then I also asked for work experience, so I can see how many years they've been working as a team leader, but also as a picker before. And then something that I want to implement in my theoretical model as well is social relationship measures. So from a couple of papers that they validated, there's some questions that I won't have time, but if anyone is interested, I can show in detail the survey. But they are used to measure social cohesion, task cohesion, directive leadership, supportive leadership, helping between each other voluntarily, peer pressure, and job satisfaction. And then additionally, I also asked about family ties. So I asked if they have their brother, their son picking for them in the group, with the hypothesis that potentially if I'm friends with my teammates, I will be more likely to call them out if they are doing a bad job. But if we don't know each other that much, maybe the incentive is not going to work because the communication is not that fluid. And then I also do games as they do in labs. They are elicitation, so they don't really know what we're measuring. For whoever is not familiar with the experimental literature, they do a game. So the risk-taking bomb, the risk-taking is called the bomb game. They're playing a game where there's a bomb in one of the, it's like the mine game from the computer, and they have to see if they wait for longer, they can get a higher pay, but they also risk getting nothing. So with that, we elicitate their risk-taking behavior, and then also competitiveness. They do a task, and then they can choose if they want to be compared with someone else. And then if they are compared, if they win, they earn double. If not, they own nothing. But they can also choose to not compete and just get the money for their own answers. So in here we have a dummy of 1 and 0 to elicit their competitiveness level. Belief elicitation survey. So I asked them before announcing. I asked them if they think they are going to win or not, and also if they think they might not win but they are close by. I also have a 1 to 5 measure for that, and then I also asked them why not. So it was more like a feedback survey. I called everyone one by one, and I did the survey in a way that it was more like feedback about the competition. It was not just me trying to get information or like see how they were going. And then afterwards, in the post-implementation survey for robustness checks purposes, and I do the same questions of the pre-implementation analysis, but I also ask them again about their expectations, what they usually do. This cuento is for the theoretical model. I won't get into it later. And then, yeah, it's also some feedback. And then to the control people, I also asked them if they knew about the other people that were participating in this competition, if they were aware of it, and then I do a robustness check afterwards. There's a few people that know, so I check if the results change. So in terms of the results, I don't have the table here, but basically I used the phase effects model. I'm still not sure which implementation strategy I'm going to use because I still don't have the data. Once I have it, I'll analyze it. So any feedback on that will be very welcome. But yeah, with the analysis that I did, a quick review is that I saw a positive treatment effect in the second one. But again, the coefficient was quite small compared to what the literature claims that this type of competitions do. But it's still relevant. The companies still save up a lot in transportation costs, in all the extra salary that they are paying to the landowners and to the pickers, and also environmental impact in terms of CO2, like unnecessary transport. I also need, like, they have a lot of people checking the quality. If they manage to get a better percentage, they probably can reduce the amount of checks. In terms of period 1 or 3, again, it might turn into significant because I still don't have all the data, but so far they were not significant. In terms of the period 1, by the feedback that I got in the survey, some of them weren't really believing that we were actually going to impress. So there was this sort of learning period at the beginning. They didn't really know what was going on. So in the second month, I felt like everyone was taking it a bit more seriously. In terms of period 3, it might be that if you twice in a row you don't win, your expectation of winning is going to be lower. Therefore, the incentive ends up being less effective. So if it ends up not being significant, then this is probably a reason. And then, so yeah, in terms of heterogeneity, I will analyze if they have won the competition or not. Then the patterns might diverge a lot. So I will plot some graphs and explain the heterogeneity. And also with the belief survey, in the second survey and in the third survey, I will also do some heterogeneity analysis there to see if the third month it's the impact is being dampened by those who already know that they're not going to win, so they're not putting any extra effort. Because maybe that means we can tackle like these beliefs rather than like maybe the incentive works. It's just to get them more motivated to know that they can actually win and show them more data maybe. Because there's a lot of variability. There's no only one person won twice. The rest were all different all the time. So yeah, this open to discussion with the company managers if they're interested. And then in terms of other measures, they are if social cohesion, peer pressure, and humans were significant for the better. And this is a funny finding. I find it funny. Job satisfaction is significant worse quality. So those who were claiming that they are satisfied with the job, they are performing more poorly. So it's, yeah, I mean, they are getting paid to pick up bad quality things. So they are obviously happier. So yeah, I found it quite funny, and it was highly significant. So yes, I think that's. So, and then in terms of the theoretical model, I am not going to bore you with the results, so it's not finished yet. But I'm basing my paper in my model in the multitasking model by Holmstrom and incentives problem that he did a few years later. But in my case, I have these two contrasting factors, the quantity and the quality, that matter for the first productivity, and then the fact that you have to use different mechanisms. You use the same mechanism to tackle different factors or the other way around. So mine is like a variety of that. And then if I feel like there's some behavioral aspects that are significant, I will also try to incorporate that theoretically. And yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments? Yes, there you go.
So, very interesting. I'm really not into the experimental things, but anyway, I have a curiosity concerning the oranges market. Mm-hmm. I mean, you mentioned in one of the slides all the findings of the literature in general, mentioning the strawberry things. That was, I mean, the same experiment adapted to strawberries, if I understood well or not.
Yeah, no, it's not the same. So they do fixed rate versus piece rate. What I meant is that they measure productivity, but their measure of productivity is only in kilograms. They don't take into account quality measures. But it's different. They are testing. They have 3 different papers. In one, they are testing what's the difference between paying them a fixed salary versus a variable salary in terms of quantity.
Okay. No, because, well, actually, I didn't really get if there are like similar experiments performed within other markets, okay? And if actually the contribution of testing this setting within the market that you are picking is actually the contribution of the paper or not. I mean,
yeah. So not exactly. So there's 2 things. There's one is the fact that my pool is quite different. but also my main contribution is the fact that I have in the measure of productivity, in other sectors, most of the measures go in the same direction. In my case, if you increase the quantity, you're probably gonna lower the quality a lot. I need to do a graph of that, but that's the main thing that the other people don't measure, because they don't measure quality, and if they do, it's not because it's work quality, it's not quality per se. It's not the quality of the item, it's not the quality of the orange, it's the fact that they turn the peel and they are picking in a bad way rather than a bad orange. So it's part of the productivity measure in this sense. And therefore, yeah, I have these two contrasting factors that I haven't seen in the literature yet.
And if I can add just one thing, do you perform the experiment within 4 different companies at the same time?
At the same time, yeah. All the dates that I have in the timeline, it was challenging. Yeah, it's all the dates is for everyone at the same time.
Okay, Juan, you have a question there.
Yes. Just a comment, just to learn a little bit more about this kind of literature and experiments. No, for me, the underlying thing behind your paper is the relative prices between quality and quantity. I mean, the return for a better quality is, if I understood well, the sound is not so good, is about 50 euros multiplied by the probability of winning. So this is very small.
So
and the price of lowering the increasing the quality is picking less fruit, less kilograms, that represents, I guess, less money, no?
So that's what we thought at the beginning, but we did some estimation. Also, we estimated if it's just about lowering the quantity, then we estimated how much they're giving up, and it would be a couple of days of work, because they work like in short periods a lot. But we calculated so that it was worth it for them. They were happy with the price. But also, surprisingly, I thought it would be the case, but the quantity they picked is not it's included as control in the results that I was showing. It's not significant. It's not making a big impact. So I mean, picking it up from the floor and picking it up from the tree is not that big of a time difference. It's more an effort difference, in my opinion. Of course, you will pick up a few less oranges maybe, but it's more about paying attention to what you pick rather than how much you pick. Like, they can still get the same quantity while improving the quality. So I thought it was going to be a big trade-off, but it's not significant at all. Yeah.
And one more question. It was the same price of a penalty in the literature. Did I explain myself? I mean, it's the same, like, I will give you a price if you bring good quality. I will penalize you if you bring bad quality, just to learn.
Yeah, so I don't penalize so that it's more, it's a cleaner analysis. It was already challenging enough to explain, because they didn't care a lot about listening to us already. So we wanted to do it as simple as possible. And then for example, Ashraf, the performance ranks and cooperation, it's quite similar in terms of they also do a tournament. But they tackle different things. It's on quantity only. But yeah, they were, so it's a clothes company, and the price was for the best performance team or the best shop, 70 euros per person. In people having a salary. So yeah, in relative terms, we're offering a slightly higher payout.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for your presentation. I mean, I'm talking about from total ignorance. I will get aside with Federico when he mentioned. I will also appreciate a bit more what's the contribution. Contrasted of the literature. I mean, what the news here is that the effects are lower, is that the quantity quality thing is different, is that the specific, and also in terms of the results, some kind of quantifiable measure or of what were the results. No, you mentioned that okay, the effect is less than expected. how much or
No,
what?
not necessarily less than expected, just less than what people say.
Yes.
But
yes.
oh yeah, so
But
I think
also
it was,
the positive consequences for the company. I mean, how are
yeah.
these
So in
monetary
relative,
terms,
yeah.
how do we understand this
Quantify.
also in terms of, because there is different agents here.
Yeah.
Um,
So the thing is that because it's still preliminary results and the coefficient might change a lot, so I didn't want to include any numbers and I didn't want to get into detail with it because the interpretation that I make right now is probably going to be very different to the one that I will do next month. So that's why I don't have any numbers and I haven't really thought about it properly, but it's definitely something that I would take into account and I would explore.
I think we're going to have to stop it there. So I think
Okay, I'm quickly follow the Federico question. He asked if the results are extensible across sectors. Are the results also extendable across roles? Because this is a low skill task. Can we have a reason to believe that they will stand also in high skill task teams?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the results are they're better applied to similar types of tasks. So I think that's one of the key things that I think that I'm potentially going to get different results from the literature just because of the pool that I have. That is quite unique. So if I find that my results are different from the literature, then yes, I cannot extrapolate to other types of tasks and the other papers by Ashraf and the ones that are working with more skilled tasks would be a better fit for those.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think that was very, very interesting. I do have some questions more than issues. I find it it's not my field, but I find it very exciting and very, very nice. The first question is just for the sake of who pays for the prize?
So Cambridge. It depends on the company. I got a funding for the surveys, and then in terms of the prices, it's either Cambridge or half funded by Cambridge and the company.
So it's fundamentally outside. It's not the company. Why not the company? In fact, the company is the one that's going to benefit the most.
Yes, but because they were so, for example, they really tried to change the salary structure once, and it didn't really work because they were complaining, "Oh, that's not my quality; it's my colleague." So just because they're a bit. They know it's a problem, but it's a lot of effort to. They weren't super.
But they were
sure
changing They were not establishing prices by groups, by teams. They were changing the salaries individually, from what you're saying.
Yeah, but I think so one of the companies I didn't fund it mainly because they thought nothing was gonna work. The other one is funding it half because I got the funds, so I was like, just because it's a trial and it took a lot of convincing because they have to do an extra effort to give me all the data because it's well organized.
You have three companies. So, one is not funding, one is funding 50%, and the third
one is funding
100%.
No, 50 as well. Sorry.
Okay, because you have a difference which is interesting. It is funded by the company, not funded by the company. I mean,
but the workers don't know who's funding it.
All right, so it would be good for the companies to fund because then it implies an involvement by the companies. Mm-hmm. So even if the workers don't know, you can also make that distinction between partially funded by the company, which implies a much bigger involvement by the company, than just funded by the researchers. So something that you might want to control, because there are a lot of things that I'm going to say that would not be implementable because you have already done it, but some I hope they will work and they will help. Then the second is, you are giving an incentive of 50 euros in merchandising or in a voucher. How big of an incentive is this, and why only one incentive and not several incentives or different incentives? So how much do these people earn in that same period?
So I do have that data, but I don't remember fully. But I remember it was worth a couple of days of labor.
So they are earning very, very little.
Depending on the time.
So, but you get 50 euros for how many days of work?
What do you mean? So their salary?
how much would they earn in the amount that you're offering in the period that you're offering them 50 euros?
Well, but it's more like plus rather than a.
Yeah, no, plus, but how much would be the basic salary?
Remember, I think.
Because that's important. If you offer me 50 euros, my incentive is close to zero. If you offer, I don't know, a very poor master student that doesn't have a penny, 50 euros for doing is going to be very high. So it's
Yeah, so it was by talking to them, it was worth enough because it's something additional that that's the thing. Like there's not a trade-off between like a full trade-off between quantity and quality. It's just putting a bit more effort, but while still getting a similar.
It's a trade-off in terms if I have to do a much bigger effort.
Yeah.
Just to get something that is not going to make that much of a difference. And of course, the question is whether the salaries are the same across companies.
Yeah,
They're very similar. So that's important.
Yeah.
All right, so that covers it. Here, I think the main issue is what Federico and what Juan were hinting at, that the benefits for the company are the kilos or the quantity that is picked minus those with a poor quality and the time it takes for actually classifying what is high quality and what is low quality. So those are the three dimensions. You are controlling for fundamentally one, which is quality, and you put one of the others, which is a control. Why not to cover you from this comment that we all have that's saying, hey, if you pick 100 kilos of oranges and 20% are wasted, you still have 80 kilos of oranges. If you pick 65 kilos and 0% is wasted, you have still less because you have 65. So why not use both quality and quality times quantity? And is there any other way that you can measure the cost, additional cost for a company actually going through the piles of oranges in this case and saying, yeah, I have to take out 20% or 55% from what has been picked up because it's what is the cost and how much does it company? If you can do that, and you can do at least the first part, the quality on the one hand, but also quality times quantity.
Yeah. See
whether there are differences in results, because I think that would shield you from a lot of criticism there. And then, my main question is it the right incentive? Is it enough? And why not try, which you cannot do, I suppose now, different incentives. So if you get instead of 50 euros, you get 100 euros. But you pick far bigger amount of oranges. For me, it would make a bigger difference than if you give me 50.
Yeah. We thought about it, but then if we had different types, we then potentially have a bigger group size, sample size. So that's why,
And I was thinking about when you were talking about social cohesion and peer pressure, which I like very much, those indicators. They can be good or bad. You're saying it's good. The question is why it's good. It would be interesting to develop. I can understand why women pick up better quality than men. Then do the quality times quantity and see whether that makes a difference in that respect. And I also found very interesting job satisfaction result that was negative. But anyway, otherwise, thank you very much. I think it was a very good. Unless you have any reactions and.
No. I agree with you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you very much to all. Thank you very much to all for coming. I think that was first an applause to. And of course, all the 4 people that presented, and also Juan over there, so another applause. And to all of you for coming in such big numbers. Apologies, I didn't allow everyone to ask questions for the final presentation, but we have to leave this room at 8. And for all of you that have followed us online, remember, we're going to have this on YouTube, so it's going to be there for posterity. You can be watching in 20 years, right? And then you will see yourselves how much you have improved as a result of being a fellow at the Cañada-Blanch Centre at the LSE. And for those of you watching online, if you like this, remember the Cañada-Blanch Centre at LSE is not just about the activities of the fellows, which are the cornerstone, also a fantastic way to learn about what's going on at the LSE at the forefront of social sciences. But also we have a lot of other activities that involve decision makers, academics, researchers all over the world coming to deal with topics that are on the side. Thank you very much, and see you all next time. Excellent.